Morning all, I'd like to show you this morning an absolutely classic master game played by Edward Lasker, which I'm not sure we've covered explicitly on this channel before. Edward Lasker is not to be confused with Emmanuel Lasker, a past world champion. Edward Lasker, though, he was a pretty strong player. He was born 1885, died 1981. He was a leading German-American chess and Go player, awarded the IM title by FIDE. He was an engineer by profession and an author. He was actually friends with the world champion Emmanuel Lasker, and actually, according to ChessGames.com, some controversy exists as to whether they could have been related. Edward Lasker wrote in his memoirs of the 1924 New York tournament, he is quoted as saying, "I did not discover that they were actually related until he, Emmanuel Lasker, told me shortly before his death that someone had shown him a Lasker family tree on which one of the branches I was dangling." So, okay, they might have been related. He authored several books, including Chess Strategy, 1913, Chess and Checkers, Chess for Fun and Chess for Blood, Chess Secrets I Learned from the Masters in 1951. Let's have a look at this brilliant game by Edward Lasker. So d4, his opponent plays e6, which retains the flexibility of inviting a French defence, or, after knight f3, going for a Dutch defence. But black, by playing f5, maybe wants white to play c4, and what's played is instead quite an annoying move, knight c3. So not c4. The idea here is to break open the centre with e4. Black puts some pressure on e4 to try and avoid that, and now this knight is pinned, so again renewing the threat of e4, unpinned. And now actually white gives up voluntarily the dark squared bishop with bishop takes f6, so it's reducing a bit black's control over e4 and the light squares in general, not just the e4 square, but this knight could have been useful for h7. So often when you give up a dark square bishop, you're intensifying some pressure on light squares. So after bishop takes f6, already e4 now becomes possible. Black took, now knight takes e4, and it looks actually quite a pleasant position for white. If black ever decides d5, then that leaves a hole on e5, which could be the subject of an attack, and then backward e pawn. So black decides to play b6, and now we see a very aggressive move, knight e5, revealing a concrete threat of queen h5 check here. For example, if bishop b7, then queen h5 check is very strong, because g6, knight takes g6. The idea is not to win the rook here, but to take the pawn. And in this position, this bishop is dropping off. So this is not very nice for black. So let's go back. So after knight e5, black is faced with a very difficult decision. What can he do? Does he really want to just, for example, take this knight off? That might be one of the better moves. He decides to castle. And now we see bishop d3, eyeing menacingly at the h7 pawn. Perhaps black in this position should consider bishop takes e5 here to try and reduce some of the attacking pieces that white has, and it might be okay. So taking knight c6, this pawn is actually weak here, so this might actually be potentially quite promising for black. But we see instead that knight tolerated for one more move with bishop b7. Okay, and here white goes all in with queen h5, really eyeing that h7 square, threatening horrible things like knight takes and queen takes. In this position, a very clever defensive move, it seems, against this idea of knight takes and queen takes is played queen e7. So the idea here is that if knight takes f6, then we have g takes protecting h7 like this, and here if the knight retreats, well, black should be okay. But okay, in this position there exists an alternative to knight takes f6 check. I wonder if you can spot it if I give you 10 seconds starting from now. Okay, a magnificent forcing move. Queen takes h7 check, believe it or not, sacrificing the queen. Only one move, and now another forcing move. Knight takes f6, double check. So black cannot take the knight. So with the check, there's two checks here. Now if the king steps back, then there's an immediate mate with knight g6. And this is what makes the game really beautiful now, that the king has to step forward. And now we see knight eg4 check, forcing the king to use only the g5 square. Everything's covered. King g5. And here we see h4 check. The king is being dragged up the board spectacularly. King f4. And now g3 check. The king's got only one square again. King f3. Bishop e2 check. The king only one square. King g2. And now can you see a beautiful little move here that white plays? Well, the king's in grave trouble anyway. In fact, the move that was chosen was actually rook h2 check, forcing the king aesthetically on the first rank with king g1. And now white could have been sadistic with casting queenside for checkmate, but actually king d2 just is played as well, which is also okay, putting black out of misery. It's not particularly sadistic, but it's checkmate. So a beautiful king walk, and it shows that, you know, maybe sometimes aggressive knights shouldn't be tolerated. They should be snapped off when the opportunity is given there. Otherwise nasty things can happen. Hope you enjoyed that. Comments or questions on YouTube. Thanks very much.